About 5 or 6 years ago, my cousin Stephanie decided to take a 30-day permaculture course in Kauai, Hawaii's northernmost island. So she bought a ticket to paradise and basically decided to stay after the course was done, living and working on a farm there. At the same time, I had been living and working in New York City for about 7 years, working my way from super poor to not so poor. And I was finally making enough money to maybe kind of possibly think of a vacation, which was a big deal to me because at that point in my life, every vacation had been paid for by parents, okay? So when she urged me to buy a ticket to Hawaii and come visit her before she left, I jumped at the chance and I bought a round-trip ticket. Now, about a day before I'm supposed to get on the plane, I get a call from her. She's been asked to leave the farm where she was staying, which is a long story for another day, but essentially this meant that my bed and breakfast had just been canceled. So if you know anything about me, I'm a planner. I'm like the person that dates grocery lists and itemizes things from where they are in the store. I have a plan to pay off debt. Like, I'm the planner. So I'm at work and I get on my computer and I start looking up hotel rooms for the week, but it turns out I'm not making enough money for that yet. So I switched to car rentals and I end up renting a van with the idea that if worst comes to worst, we can at least stay in the van. And when I get on the plane, I'm just telling myself over and over, like, just go with the flow. It's going to be fine. Just go with the flow. So I get out of the airport when I get there, and I look to my left, and I see this small white Toyota pickup truck coming at me, and my cousin is hanging out the passenger side window, waving at me and grinning ear to ear. She's so happy to see me. Steph lost access to a vehicle when she left the farm, so she had spent that day at her local coffee shop getting to know this dude named Brad. And Brad had graciously offered to pick me up from the airport and take us to the rental car agency where we could pick up our big red minivan. We named that Big Red. And not only that, but he had asked us if we could stay that night in his tent in the woods. So we did. And it wasn't until the next morning that I realized that Brad lived in what was essentially Squatters Row in Hawaii. So what I could gather is most of the free-spirited hippies that visit Kauai and don't leave kind of get together and figure out where the abandoned lot is for the most recent rich person who's about to build their dream home on it, and then they make it a campsite. But Brad was great. I woke up the next morning surrounded by mountains and this most lush valley, and there's little chickens running around. It was really beautiful. It was hard to be skeeved out, and we ended up having breakfast with him that day, and he took us to several different beaches, some of which Steffi hadn't even seen, and showed us this most amazing cavern with water in it that was so blue it looked like it had been dyed. But eventually Brad went on his way and we went on ours. Steph had a tent of her own, so we didn't really need his anymore. We spent that next night camping out, probably illegally, but on a secluded beach that Steph loved. So by the third night, I desperately wanted a real mattress and a shower. And we ended up booking a hostel in the town of Hanalei. Which was exciting. I'd never stayed at a hostel. And I was super excited about a shower. So I get all of my stuff together, and I walk into the bathroom, and the shower is hanging from the wall above the toilet. And there's no hook, so the only way to feel like you're showering is if you hold it above your own head, and in that case, you're going to get your clothes wet because they're about a foot away from you. So it wasn't the experience I was looking for, but I was clean, and I was going with the flow. Sorry, she's here right now, so I'm just, hey. One of the perks about having a cousin who had been in Kauai for 6 months before I got there was that she had connections, and one of them was that she had worked for a small time as a ziplining guide. So, stop talking. So I was super excited because she actually offered a sailing excursion instead of a ziplining tour because I'm super afraid of heights, and that would have been embarrassing. So we get on this big catamaran, and it sails us around the entire island. We got to see the Napoli coast, which is infamous for its beauty. You've probably seen it because it's featured in the Jurassic Park movies, but it's really hard to get to on foot, so the best way to see it's from the sea. We stopped at one point in this cove and we're snorkeling, and everybody starts pointing, and I look up and we're swimming with this giant sea turtle, which like they don't allow you to do. And then it got better. We got back on the boat and we run into this large pod of spinner dolphins who are dozing after coming in from the sea. And it's a nursery pod. So we're sailing, and there's all these little baby dolphin footballs flying out of the sea and spinning, and it's like a dream come true. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a marine biologist, and there's still not a lot I can't tell you about dolphins, whales, and porpoises. So this was like the most amazing experience, and to this day is like one of the best days of my life. One of the other things Steph really wanted to do while I was there was sleep out under the Milky Way at this really famous, really hard to get to beach called Polahale. The only way to get to this beach is through like this dirt road, unpaved, potholes the size of pickup trucks. We were really afraid Big Red wasn't going to make it, but she did. And she did just in time for us to select like shrubbery on top of the dunes to watch the sunset. So as the sun is going down, Steffi tells me that she doesn't want to put the tent up. She just wants to sleep under the stars and stargaze, which I'm like skeptical about because I lived in New York, and like when you sleep without a tent in New York, you're basically just homeless. But I was going with the flow, so I was like, okay. So we start making our beds, and like she's got a nice sleeping pad and her sleeping bag and a pillow, and I was visiting, so I had like my towel and the two like lightweight sarongs I had bought at the souvenir shop the day before. But like we're making the beds and then we're trying to get comfortable. And when we're done, like we noticed it didn't get any darker than like the twilight hour. And that night the moon was full and there were no clouds. And when the moon shines off the water, it looks like somebody just turned the lights on. So there would be no stargazing that night. So I'm officially irritated, but like I'm gonna sleep, it's gonna be fine. Except the shrubbery we have decided to nest in has these thorns that are like an inch long, and any piece of me that's like off of my towel or shifting is getting like pricked. So I'm not exactly comfortable. But around 4 a.m., it starts to get a little darker, and the moon is starting to set. And I nudge Steph to make sure she's awake, and we sit up and we watch the most beautiful moonset over the sea. And if you've never seen a moonset, it looks exactly like a sunset, except it doesn't have the glowing red ball in the middle, so you can actually watch the entire thing. And there were about 15 minutes after that went down before the sun rose that I got to see the Milky Way in all its glory, and it was absolutely extraordinary. Even so, the next day, as we navigated out from this dirt road away from Polahale, it was my last day there, I downloaded the Hotels.com app and booked us a room in a nice hotel for my last night there because I was desperately in need of a shower and a real bed before a 14-hour journey back to New York City, which is so relaxing. And I enjoyed it. I have a distinct memory of her saying to me when I got out of the bathroom, "Wow, you were in there a really long time." This entire trip was just full of experiences that I never thought I would have, and I probably wouldn't have chosen for myself, but that ended up being the most amazing experiences of my life, and I could not be happier or more grateful that I decided to get on that plane with limited to no knowledge of how this trip would go.